There's handouts, Scott, or Justin, sorry. If you need, there's a thin handout and a thick handout. You want one of each. What? Yes, I've been shorn. It was too hot. So, all right. Welcome, everyone. We're going to jump in. I'm going to open in prayer, and we'll dive in. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, for all you've done for us, Lord, and please give us your wisdom to understand this chapter of Revelation, Lord. And Lord, we just ask for your Spirit to be upon us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so today we're going to be looking at chapter 17 only because, as you can see on your thin handout, there's been a change to the schedule. So we've done through most of the classes, but my plan had been to spend just one weekend on chapters 17, 18, and then 19, and then 20, and then the last two. But as I got through it, I realized how complex this chapter especially was. And so I was just firmly aware that I wasn't going to be able to get through chapter 18 today. So next week we'll be doing chapter 18 and the beginning of chapter 19. And then after that we'll do the return of Christ, which is the rest of 19, and then the final battle, which is chapter 20. And then we'll finish with the last class. So that's what that schedule is for there. And so I just want to give you that update. All right, let's dive into it. Let me get to my... All right. So the thin copy is just your normal note sheet. All right. The thick copy is basically the last 10 pages of my notes that I wrote up so that you had them, because I'm going to go fast. There's a lot of verses, and I'm sure you're going to want to look at it more in-depthly later. So and it's very complex. That's why I had to parse this out. So Babylon the Great is what we're looking at today. You know, we just heard about Babylon the Great last week in chapter 14. Remember, the second angel flew through the heavens and said, "Fallen and fallen is Babylon the Great." And we also heard about Babylon the Great in chapter 16, when the last bowl was poured out over the air in Jerusalem, the earthquake split apart. All of a sudden, Babylon the Great is remembered before God because of her sins. So this isn't something new. This is something we've been hearing about. We even hear about it in the Old Testament, Isaiah 21:9. "Now behold, here comes a troop of riders, horsemen in pairs. And one said, Fallen, fallen is Babylon, and all the images of her gods are shattered to the ground." And Jeremiah 51:9. "Suddenly Babylon has fallen and been broken. Wail over her." So we see this echoed in the Old Testament. Now, the Old Testament, the prophets are speaking about ancient Babylon, about the empire and the city. But it echoes into Revelation. And that's what we're trying to look at here today. How is this echoing into Revelation? There's a thin and a thick one, Justin. Okay, so we're going to look at that today. So let's take a deeper look at Babylon itself. Is Babylon mentioned anywhere else in the New Testament beside Revelation? Yes. At the end of the first letter of Peter, Peter says, "She who is in Babylon, chosen together with you, sends you greetings, and so does your son Mark." Okay, so is Peter hiding out in ancient Babylon? Is that what he's trying to get at? So Babylon was a ruin at that time. I mean, there was settlements in the areas of Mesopotamia, what we know of Iraq today, but there was nobody living in Babylon. There's definitely no church there. And so why is Peter saying, "She who is in Babylon," or chosen elect in Babylon, salutes you? Well, what we're looking at here is Peter's naming something else Babylon. So the reason why we know that he's not in Babylon is there's a prophecy that said Babylon will never be inhabited again. Okay, in Isaiah 13:19 and 22 it says, "And Babylon, the beauty of kingdoms, the glory of the Chaldeans' pride, will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It will never be inhabited or lived in from generation to generation. Nor will the Arab pitch his tent, nor will shepherds make their flocks lie down there. But desert creatures will lie down there, and their houses will be full of owls. Ostriches also will live there, and the shaggy goats will frolic there. Hyenas will howl there, and fortified towers, and jackals in their luxurious places. Her fateful time also will soon come, and her days will not be prolonged." So this prophecy says that Babylon itself, the great city, will never be inhabited again. Interesting note is Saddam Hussein, when he was in charge of Iraq, had goals to reestablish Babylon, to rebuild it. You know what happened 6 months after he started that goal? he was hanged. They invaded, they took the city, and that was it. So again, we can see even that prophecy still being fulfilled. So Babylon can't be rebuilt. And so Peter must be saying something else. He's calling something else Babylon. And so we know that Peter spent the last years of his life in Rome, right? He was starting the church there, he was helping, he was martyred there. So what he seems to be saying in this verse is that the church in Rome salutes you. But he's using the word Babylon. Why? Well, a lot of times we refer to a place or a thing based off its characteristics that reminds us of something else, right? Or like we look at something that's like, that's this, because it reminded us of that. So we're very familiar with Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and York, right? Okay. So does anyone know if Lancaster was the original name of that city? It was actually called Hickorytown. And then man John Wright, Wrightsville is named after him, came in the area and he renamed it. Why? He was from Lancaster, England. And so it reminded him so much of his home, and he wanted that piece of it, so he renamed it Lancaster. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why you have to say Lancaster, or else they'll yell at you. But yeah, I mean, so the same thing with York. Settlers from Philadelphia who had come from England settled in that area and named it York, right? There's a city called York in England, all right? And they're very famous cities because there was a great war fought between them, the War of the Roses, it was called. So the House of Lancaster in England had the symbol of a red rose. The House of York had the symbol of a white rose. If you look at the seals of the cities of York and Lancaster today, you will see a white rose for York and a red rose for Lancaster. So that red rose transport, red rose this, that. That's why Lancaster is so. But you see, so like it wasn't named that because it was named because it reminded him some way of his home. Okay. Has anyone ever heard of Scotland Yard? What's Scotland Yard? The cops of England. It's the British, mainly in London, but it's the British police force, right? So originally, it was in a small little area of governmental buildings, and it was the police building. But there was an alleyway that would lead into that where the common people usually went in. It was called Scotland Yard. The alley was called Scotland Yard, like the courtyard. And so that's the common people would go in that way. That's why they referred to it. We got to go to Scotland Yard to go to the police. Well, Scotland Yard is no longer in that building. It's about 2 miles away in a very high-tech, modern building, but it's still called Scotland Yard, right? Why? Because it's where the British police force is held. The name carried over, the identity carried over to this new building. This is called a metonym, and that's what you see there on your paper. So what Peter's using here is a metonym. He's referring to Rome as Babylon. Does that make sense? Because he looks around Rome and sees all the idolatry, sees the pride, sees that Caesar is demanding that he be worshipped as a god. And he's like, this is Babylon. He's a Jew. Babylon is one of the most intrinsically ingrained places for a Jew in that time. And so he's looking around at Rome. He's like, this is Babylon. And he's letting the people know, like, I'm in Babylon. This Roman Empire is Babylon. All right. So it has the characteristics of ancient Babylon. It has the pride, it has the idolatry, the false religion, and all of that. And so that's what that a metonym is. And the reason why we're going through all that, again, as you're going to see, hopefully, the name is transitioning from ancient Babylon to Rome to what we're looking at today. So we're not talking about when it says Babylon the Great, we're not talking about, someone rebuilt Babylon, because that prophecy says, it's very clear that no one's going to rebuild Babylon. But what are we talking about then? The characteristics, the name, the identity of what Babylon was, the pride, the idolatry, the false religion, has now moved over to whatever we're looking at today. So that's a metonym, and that's what we're trying to get at. That's what the point of trying to get that across is like to see that we're not talking about ancient Babylon when we say Babylon the Great. We're talking about somehow the characteristics of ancient Babylon came onto this thing. So what does the Bible say about Babylon? Well, first time we find the name Babylon it's in reference to a descendant of Ham, who was the son of Noah. So this descendant of Ham was named Nimrod. In Genesis 10:8, we see, now Cush became the father of Nimrod. He became a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. So the phrase like a mighty hunter before the Lord means, it came out to me that Nimrod considered himself more powerful than God. He was better than God. So you see that this, and one of his first cities was Babel, which eventually becomes Babylon. So Babel was founded in pride, right? There's even some indication that the tower itself, the Tower of Babel, was lifted up as a defiance to God. Like, you will not flood us out again. We're going to build a tower so high that you're not going to flood us out again. And then we move to the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11:8-9. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore the name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth. And so the word Babel means confusion, right? That's why it's called that. And we'll see that as this progresses, just what that confusion causes. And then in 2 Kings 17:24 and 30, we're told that the king of Assyria brings people from Babylon all throughout his and to live in Samaria. So the king of Assyria came in and destroyed the northern kingdoms of Israel. He took a bunch of his people, some from Babylon, and put them there and took the Jews out. Okay, and so they had all these foreigners running around in Samaria. And in 2 Kings 12-19, King Hezekiah receives some ambassadors from Babylon. So the king has recovered from his sickness, and these ambassadors from Babylon come, and he's so just proud of everything God has given him. He shows them everything. He shows them all the money he has. He shows them all his defenses. He shows them everything. And then Isaiah the prophet comes up to him and says, "What have you shown them?" And he says, "I've shown them everything." And he's like, "Well, since you've shown them everything, they're going to come in and take everything. But it's not going to happen in your time. It's going to happen in your son's time." Remember the one a couple weeks ago, we were like, don't fall into the apathy of Hezekiah. Don't think that, oh, it's not going to happen in my time, so that's good. But yeah, that's where, so Babylon comes in, sees everything in Jerusalem, everything that King Hezekiah has, and they take notes so that, when they come in, they know what he has. And this apathy seems to bleed over into Hezekiah's son. Manasseh was the worst king of Judah. He was possibly even the worst king of all the kings. He exhibited all the characteristics of Babylon: wickedness, folly. He sacrificed his children. He made the people sacrifice their children. He got into witchcraft and everything. It was a pretty bad guy. And so we're told in 2 Kings 7-16, that it was because of Manasseh's sins that the destruction came on Jerusalem. We're told, then he set the carved images of the Asherah that he had made in the house which the Lord said to David and to his son Solomon, "In this house in Jerusalem, which I have chosen from all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever." So Manasseh puts a false god into the temple where God said, "No, this is where I've placed my name. And I will not make the feet of Israel wander anymore from the land which I gave their fathers, if only they will observe and do according to all that I have commanded them, and according to all the law that my servant Moses commanded them." But they did not listen, and Manasseh seduced them to do evil more than the nations from whom the Lord destroyed before the sons of Israel. So Manasseh didn't just start doing this stuff and people followed him. He made them do it. He seduced them to do it. And so that word seduce is very, very important. Now the Lord spoke through his servants, the prophets, saying, "Because Manasseh, king of Judah, has done these abominations, having done wickedly more than all the Amorites did who were before him, and has also made Judah sin with his idols." So if you're here for the first class, we did on the judgments, on the seal judgments. When I was going over the conquest of Jericho, I mentioned that there was a reason why Abraham wasn't given the land right away. He had to wait, right? One of the reasons was, it says, the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So their sins had not yet built up the point where God's like, I'm going to destroy Jericho. I'm going to destroy the Canaanites. And so here we see that finally Judah, Israel's sin had gotten so great that Manasseh crossed the line. God's like, I have to bring judgment now. So that's important, all right? Because why is God bringing judgment at the end? Why is the final judgment coming? What's that? The iniquity of the earth has come up, and we'll see that verse in a little while. But so we see that Manasseh's sin brought that on, not in his lifetime, but it was because of that his sin that it came on. And then it goes on just to continue saying about why it was Manasseh's fault. One interesting note about King Manasseh in 2 Chronicles 33, 11 to 16, we see that he's taken to Babylon. He's captured. He's taken to Babylon, put in jail, and he repents. He's in jail. He's lost his kingdom. He's at the worst part of his life, and he repents. He cries out to God, and God hears him and forgives him. And he goes back, he tears down all the altars, and he changes. So it's actually kind of a very powerful redemptive story. But so the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, devote many chapters to the description of Babylon and its fall. The prophet Daniel is in Babylon during the time of its reign. Ezra, Nehemiah, Haggi, Zachariah all detail what happened as the Jews returned from Babylon. And so those are, we can't go over all those sections today, but those are sections to look at if you want to know more about Babylon. So what I've done here is I've taken my notes in that big, thick handout, and I'm going to go through it, but I want you to have them so that you can follow along or go through them later. So what I do see when I mentioned, so what I see when I've mentioned about Babylon, it was founded on pride of Nimrod, who thought himself above God. It was the Tower of Babel there. The people were trying to say, we're unstoppable. It was full of idolatry, wickedness, and false religion. It had terrible philosophies. It was this hub of economic and cultural economic and cultural capital of the world at the time of its empire. And it was used by God to punish his people. Babylon was used to punish Jerusalem for their sins. And Peter then attributes these characteristics to Rome, calling Rome Babylon. Martin Luther attributed the same name to the Roman Church, the Roman Catholic Church. He said that the church was in the exile to Babylon because it was under the Catholic reign. So again, we see this idea of false religion, idolatry, economic wickedness, moral wickedness, associated with this name Babylon. All right, and so that's what I wanted to hit home in this first part. Moving to the big, thick part, the big, thick handout. So we're going to go through Revelation chapter 17. 1 to 2. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality." So the chapter starts out as almost an interlude for what we just witnessed with the bowl judgment. So that the angel pours out his bowl, and then he goes over and walks and says, "Hey, come here, I want to show you something." Because what happened at the last bowl judgment? The city split apart, and we have this phrase, and Babylon the Great was remembered before God because of her immoralities. And so the angel's like, "Come here, let me show you what's going on here." And so this is what we're going to look at here. And so we see in that chapter 16, 19, when the bowl's poured out and we see Babylon Great, it says that she's given the cup of the wine of God's wrath. And then in Revelation 14:8, it also says she made the nations drink the wine of her immorality. They were drunk with it. Now here in chapter 17:2, we not only see the nations, but both the leaders and the people of those nations are drinking the wine of her immorality, or getting drunk on it. So here indicated the woman, this harlot, sits on many waters, which Jeremiah the prophet also uses in relation to the original Babylon. So if you go back to Jeremiah 51, a little note on Jeremiah 51, if you read that chapter and then read this chapter, the things just pop all over the place, the connections. So, but Jeremiah 51:13, "O you who dwell by many waters, abundant in treasure, your end has come, the measure of your end." So what are the many waters she sits on? Well, the angel tells John in verse 15, that we'll get to later, he says, the many waters are peoples, multitudes, and nations. Okay, so it's not just water. She's sitting over or connected to many peoples, nations, and tongues. So again, we hear a symbolic reference to what many waters might mean in the Bible. So this is a general reference to what that means spiritually or prophetically. Because we see in Psalm 29:3 about God, the voice of the Lord is upon the waters. The God of glory thunders, and the Lord is over many waters. Okay, the Lord is over all people. Okay, that's what it's getting at. All right, so Jeremiah 51:7. So again, I told you, Jeremiah 51 is a deep connection here. "Babylon has been a golden cup in the hand of the Lord, intoxicating all the earth. The nations have drunk of her wine, therefore the nations are going mad." And so we see here that the woman has affected leaders and nations, entire peoples, with her immoralities. They drink the wine of it and they get drunk on it. And they're going mad, Jeremiah would even say. And so just as Babylon did this, Babylon didn't just conquer people. It spread its false religions and its false moralities and everything as it went. But every major empire has done that. The Greeks did it. The Greeks corrupted when when Alexander the Great conquered Israel. He just totally messed up a lot of the Jewish people's religion and their beliefs. Whenever an empire comes, it tries to imprint its ideology, its religion, its beliefs upon whoever it conquers. Even if they sit there and say, well, we're going to let you rule yourself. Rome was like, yeah, you can rule yourself. You just have to worship our emperor as a god. All right. So again, it's part of an empire. All right. So Revelation 17, 3-7. And he carried me away. So the angel carries him away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of the abominations and of the unclean things of her immorality. And on her forehead a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. When I saw her, I wondered greatly. And the angel said to me, why do you wonder? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, which is the 7 heads and the 10 horns. So there's a connection here deeply to Zachariah 4, 5-11. So going back to the prophet Zachariah, our good friend, who we've gone too many times. Then the angel who was speaking with me, this is Zachariah the prophet, angel speaking to him now. Angel was speaking to me, went out and said to me, lift up now your eyes and see what this is that is going forth, is going out. I said, what is it? And he said, this is the ephah going forth. An ephah is a basket. This is the ephah going forth. Again, he said, this is their appearance in all the land. And behold, a lead cover was lifted up. And this is a woman sitting inside the ephah. Then he said, this is wickedness. And he threw her down into the middle of the ephah and cast the lead weight on its opening. Then I lifted my eyes and looked, and there were 2 women were coming out with the wind in their wings. And they had the wings like the wings of a stork. And they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heavens. I said to the angel, who is speaking with me? Where are they taking the ephah? He said to me, to build a temple for her in the land of Shinar, which is where Babylon was. And when it was prepared, she will be set there on her pedestal. This prophecy in Zechariah 4 gives us insight into the beginnings of this woman we're looking at now, that sits on the beast. The ephah, or the basket, so the basket itself was their appearance going into all the world. Who's there? It's T-H-E-I-R. Who is there? It's the Jewish people. So whenever they went into the world, this basket, this ephah, was their appearance. So an ephah usually held grain, right? So grain is good. It's for food. You can mix it with it. But when he got close, what was in it? It was empty except for wickedness. Okay, that's the judgment against the people of Israel. They were given the law. They were supposed to have life, but they turned to wickedness. Okay, so that was their appearance wherever they went. And so this points that idea of a woman and wickedness points us back to the first 10 chapters of Proverbs. If you ever read the first 10 chapters of Proverbs, there's a contrast between wisdom, who's a woman, and folly or wickedness, who's also a woman. And one calls out, they both call out, but one calls out life, the other calls out death, right? And so that's what we're kind of looking at here as the essence of this woman, is that folly, that wickedness. So the ephah, or the basket that was being carried by the 2 women with the wings of the stork, in Leviticus 11:19, it tells us that a stork is one of the detestable birds, one of the birds that will make you unclean if you touch it. And so we get in, some people are like, oh, they're angels. No, these are not angels. These are servants of evil. Okay, that's why it says they're the wings of the stork. It's a symbol of the evil that's going. So these flying women, if you touch them, would make you unclean. All right, so that gives you an indication of what they are. And so this is further supported by the statement that these women are carrying wickedness into the land of Shinar, which is where Babylon is. She's carrying them to build a temple for her and set her on a pedestal, right? Okay. And so an iron cover is placed over the ephah, showing that God's power can restrain wickedness. So the iron cover shows God, okay, I'm going to restrain this for now. Okay, so God is restraining this. And we will find in a few minutes when we read 2 Thessalonians that the revealing of the Antichrist and his empire, or the beast that this woman rides on, is through the workings of the devil. And so pointing to the fact that the heart of this empire is a temple to wickedness. Okay? I hope keep with me here. All right, so we also know that she is drunk with the blood of the saints and the witnesses of Jesus, this woman, the Revelation, the great Babylon. So note the distinction here between the two categories. If Christ followers were just the only ones, if it was just Christians, then you could have just said the witnesses of Jesus. But they include the saints. And so saints are Old Testament also. Saint means holy one or set apart. And so there are those in the Old Testament we know are with Christ. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Okay, we know they're with God and with Christ. And so this kind of, she has been affecting not just the New Testament saints, but also the Old Testament saints with wickedness. Okay, Revelation 17:8. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come up out of the abyss and go to destruction. And those who dwell on the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will wonder when they see the beast that he was and he is not and he will come. Well, didn't we just see this beast she's riding on somewhere else? In Revelation chapter 13, we see the same beast rising up out of the sea, the abyss. In Revelation 13, 1-2. And the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore, and I saw the beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads. And on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his heads were blasphemous names. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like those of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. One thing I want to point out here before it's forgotten, did you notice in chapter 13 we first see this beast? He only has blasphemous names on his heads. Where are the blasphemous names in chapter 17 we're looking at today? He's covered in them. So you see that now you add the woman wickedness to the empire, and the wickedness spreads. The blasphemy spreads. That's the heart of this empire is wickedness. And so it's an interesting note that they were just covering his heads before when he first appears, but then you add this woman, this wickedness, this Babylon, and all of a sudden the blasphemy spreads. So it indicates that she is somehow a false religion. At the heart of her is a false religion that spreads blasphemy. So what do we know about this beast? It is the Antichrist. We talked about this before, and it's also his empire. Daniel tells us whenever you see a beast, it's the empire, but it's also the major leader of that empire. Just as like Greece was the leopard, but it also included Alexander the Great, who was the main leader there. So it's the Antichrist, but it's also the empire. So it's the man and the empire. So where's the connection of this woman's wickedness? Well, Zachariah would seem to indicate that the beast is her pedestal, right? The woman was taken into Shinar and set on a pedestal. A temple was made for her. What do we see in Revelation? The woman is sitting on top of the beast as if pedestal. It's the same. See, in Zechariah you have the beginning of this, and now in Revelation you see the fruition of it, the completion of it. So that's where we're getting at with this. And so in 2 Thessalonians 2, 5-8, Paul says, "Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things? And you know what restrains him now, so that in his time he will be revealed." Him as being the man of lawlessness, the Antichrist. "For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way." And so we know a mystery is something that is happening behind the scenes, behind the veil. We can't see it, but it's happening, right? So there is a mystery of lawlessness. And this isn't just any this isn't any criminal activity. When Paul says lawlessness, he means against the law of Moses, against the moral law, okay? And so this man of lawlessness will have no reverence for God's law, for his commands. But there's also a mystery of lawlessness. And so evil and crime and wickedness is not just some random thing. It's not chaotic. Because what we're going to find out is in 2 Thessalonians 2, 9-12, I'll read it here. "Then that lawless one will be revealed, the man, the Antichrist, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming." Chapter 19. That is the one who is coming in accord with the activity of Satan. And so right here we see that the Antichrist, all this work, this lawlessness, this wickedness in the earth, it's not random. It's being strategically planned to bring about the Antichrist and his kingdom. Okay, Satan is working this wickedness. He's been working it for a long time to that end. So the lawless one is the Antichrist. So if you want to know more about the Antichrist, 2 Thessalonians is a great area. But, with every kind of power, sign, and false wondering, with every wicked deception, that's how Satan is making his plan work. Those are the ways he's bringing this about. So, just as we see God hardening Pharaoh's heart to bring out his glory, we also see that God in this section of in this section of 2 Thessalonians, it says God will send a delusion upon all those who did not accept Jesus. Okay, so that's what we're building to here. This woman sitting on the pedestal of the beast is wickedness. It's what Zachariah talked about. But it's all through the working of Satan. There is a plan behind it. Okay, there's a reason behind it. And so, touching on the phrase "was and is not and is about to come up out of the abyss," it's a Greek word melon. It's one word, and what it means, it has a past and a present meaning. And so that's why it says was and is not. And what it basically means is it's about to come. It's going to happen soon. It's coming up soon. So it hasn't happened yet. Okay, that's the point I want to bring. This hasn't happened yet. The beast hasn't come yet. And again, we also see that from Revelation 13:3, it said, "I saw one of its heads, this beast, had been slain, and its fatal wound was healed, and the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast." So this leader, this Antichrist, is going to be slain in some way and come back, and people are going to be amazed, is what we're looking at there. And so this beast from the abyss, it will share the characteristics of all the past empires, but at the heart of it will be that temple of wickedness. And so in Daniel 7:6-7, it's on your sheets there, it talks about those past empires. It talks about the leopard, which was Greece. It talks about the lion. It talks about the lion, which was Babylon. It talks about the bear, which is Persia. But then it talks about a fourth beast, an iron one, and that's Rome. Okay, so this beast in Revelation is going to have characteristics of all those other empires. So Revelation 17:9-13. "Here's the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. When he comes, he must remain a little while. The beast which is and is not is himself also an 8th, and is one of the 7, and he goes to destruction. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These have the one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast." So it sounds kind of confusing, but if we look at the Old Testament, and Daniel especially, Daniel's a great, whenever it talks about a beast, go to Daniel, because that's where you get a lot of information on it. So we know this beast, so in the Old Testament, a mountain was prophetically an empire. It was another name. It was another prophetic or symbolic symbol of an empire. Okay, and so what does this passage say about the Antichrist? So we know the beast, and we know that from the book of Daniel, a beast is also his empire. So we can see from this passage that the mountains are the empires. So 7 empires, 7 mountains, which also represent their famous leaders. So in Daniel 2:35, you see the statue of iron, bronze, silver, and clay, and then out of a mountain comes a rock, and it crushes that statue. But then it becomes a mountain itself, which is Christ's kingdom. So again, with Christ's kingdom, we see it referenced as a mountain. Also in Daniel 2:44-45, we see exactly that. God will raise up a kingdom out of that mountain, and so we see that the mountain represents an empire or a kingdom. Jeremiah 51:25, again, Jeremiah 51. "Behold, I'm against you, O destroying mountain, who destroys the whole earth, declares the Lord." So this is God judging Babylon, calling it a destroying mountain. So if we look at these heads on the beast as empires, the statement that 5 have fallen points to 5 empires of the past that have dominated the world but are no more. The one that is, it says one is, that would be Rome. John's writing during the Roman Empire, and so one that is would be Rome. So the fact that Rome is there gives us an indication of what the other 5 are. Okay, and so that only accounts. So we look at Daniel, and we see we have Rome with John. And then Daniel, we have Greece, we have Persia, and Babylon. Right? Those are the 3 other empires. Wait, that's only three of the five. Where are the other two? Well, the other two major empires that we know about from the Bible are Babylon and Assyria. Okay, and so both there's a lot of judgments against Assyria and Egypt and Assyria. So the other two empires would be Egypt and Assyria. Ezekiel 29:3 and Isaiah 14:23 to 27 talk about their judgment. Those are the five ones that have fallen. Egypt first, Assyria took over Egypt, Babylon took over Assyria, Persia took over Babylon, Greece took over Persia, Rome took over Greece. Okay, and so Rome is the current one. We also see the 10 horns here. The beast, each head has two horns, or a number of horns. They're 10 kings. They're ruler. What it means is they're rulers that have ambition for empire, but they never get it. They want an empire, but they never get it. And what we can see there, they're also a part of the seventh, that empire that's to come. So the empires to come, if you remember the statue in Daniel, it ended with feet of clay mixed with iron. So what that is it's clay it's people trying to build an empire but not able to. And so some point in the future, you're going to have 10 kings, 10 rulers who all of a sudden give all of their land and authority to one man. That's what the meaning is. And so when it says that the beast is an eighth, but it's one of the seven, that little horn, and Daniel talks about a little horn coming up among the other horns. That's the Antichrist. And so the Antichrist will be one of these rulers, but he will grow in power, and the rest of the rulers will give their lands and authority to him, thus creating his empire, the eighth empire. Does that make sense? So it's actually, if you this passage seems hard, but if you look at the part that talks about the Antichrist, the eighth kingdom, it gives you the information for the others. It tells you the heads are empires, right? And so and it also tells you that this leader will come out of one of the seven heads. Okay, and so that's basically the point, is that this Antichrist, this leader, by the working of Satan, will rise out of the seventh head. And it hasn't happened yet. We haven't had some person get all the land in the world and take it over. So we haven't had this happen yet. Revelation 17:14. These will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And so the Antichrist and his lesser kings and their armies will head out to battle to try to defeat Jesus the Lamb and his armies. They will find out, and we will find out the outcome of that battle in 2 weeks. So this does point us back to some previous chapters in Revelation, though. The sixth seal, the day of the Lord. The sky was split apart like a scroll when it's rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of their place. The kings of the earth and the great men and the commanders and rich and strong and every slave and free man hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks and the mountains. And they said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne, from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand? So why are they there, the kings and the mighty men and the warriors? Revelation 16:13 and 14. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs. For they are spirits of demons, performing signs which go out to the kings of the whole world to gather them together for the war of the great day, the day of the Lord Almighty. So why are they there? Because these demon frogs came and gathered them and deceived them to bring them to there. And so we see that this is all leading up to this day of the Lord. And so what we're going to get into kind of next week, but definitely at the day of the Lord when Jesus returns, is all of this is culminating to that point. All of the seals were culminating to that point where the sky rolls back and Jesus appears. All of for some reason, the Antichrist will come with his armies into Israel. All right, remember the valley of Jezreel, the battle of Armageddon. They're going to be there. Why? Because there's something about Jerusalem that they don't like. There's something about that area they have to get rid of. So let's look at the last part of Revelation 17. And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are the peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, these will hate the harlot and will make her desolate and naked and will eat her flesh and will burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having common purpose, by giving their kingdom to the beast, until the words of God be fulfilled. The woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So we see here that for some reason, all of a sudden the Antichrist, the beast will turn on the woman. Why? Well, history kind of tells us. So Theodosius I was an emperor of Rome. He's the one that made Christianity the empire of the Roman Empire, the religion of the Roman Empire, okay? He did this because he was a Christian, but he also did it for political reasons. If you conquer many nations, you have many different cultures, many different ideologies, how do you keep that together? You can't keep it, you can keep it together by force. You can put people in prison and shove them off, but that doesn't work that well, right? But if they all have the same religion, if they all have the same belief, if they worship in the same temples, that makes it so much easier to keep people together, control them. And so that's what you're going to see. The beast and his kings are going to use the woman, this false religion, to bind the empire together in the beginning, but towards the end, they're going to be done with her. All right? The beast is going to want power for himself. And so they're going to turn on her and destroy her. That's the meaning of what's going on there. Now, I've put a little blurb at the end of that, your handout there. What is this great city? Well, John uses the term great city 4 times in Revelation. Each time we see Jerusalem in view. Remember also the woman wickedness from the prophecy of Zachariah 5. You know, she was put into the basket. She's related to the Jews. So I don't have time to go through all this now, because I want to get to the end part, but I will cover this identity of the woman next week. But I put that little blurb there just to keep, you know, so you can look at it. But so living in the light of eternity, I want to hit that part before I go. Remember when I was talking about the man of lawlessness in 2 Thessalonians, the Antichrist? I mentioned that his coming was being worked by the scheming of the devil. It was the devil's schemes of wickedness and power that was going to bring this about, right? So the works of the devil are lies, wickedness, worldliness, false religion, and beliefs, right? Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians 2:11, so that no advantage will be taken of us by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his schemes. Okay, so the first part is, in the context of Paul is specifically referencing forgiving someone in the 2 Corinthians there. Paul is talking about forgiving these that have hurt him. And so forgiveness is one of our greatest weapons to combat the schemes of the enemy, because his is all like by myself, selfishness, self-centeredness. Forgiveness is one of the greatest weapons we have against this working of the enemy. We know his schemes, right? We're not ignorant. If we become ignorant, though, of the devil's schemes, we will fall into what Paul describes to Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:24-26. Paul says to Timothy, the Lord's bondservant must not be quarrelsome, but must be kind to all, able to teach, patient when wronged, with gentleness correcting those who are in opposition, if perhaps God may grant them repentance leading to the knowledge of the truth, and they may come to their senses and escape from the snare of the devil, having been held captive to him by him to do his will. So if we do not, as I ended last week, if we don't eat this book, we can become ignorant, and we can fall into this snare. The devil is laying a scheme, a plan. All the wickedness in the world is not just random chaos. It is methodically placed with a scheme behind it to bring about this end. And so if we don't eat this book and walk in the light of this book, we can very easily fall into one of those snares. We must therefore avoid the snares of the devil. But how? Well, the devil's ways are the ways of the world and the philosophies and thoughts of the world. And so the Bible offers us an extensive amount of wisdom on how to avoid the schemes of the devil. And I believe a verse that encompasses the overall goal of the verses that you can find. So there's so many verses you can find to combat the devil. But James 1:21-27, James writes, therefore, putting aside all filthiness and all that remains of wickedness, in humility, receive the word implanted, receive the word implanted, which is able to save your souls. But prove yourselves doers, so don't just read it. Prove yourselves doers of the word and not merely hearers who delude themselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks at his natural face in the mirror. For once he looks at himself and has gone away, he has immediately forgotten what kind of person he was. But one who looks intently at the perfect law, the law of liberty, and abides by it, not having become a forgetful hearer, but an effectual doer, this man will be blessed in what he does. If anyone thinks himself to be religious, and yet does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this man's religion is worthless. Pure and undefiled religion in the sight of our God and Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. So we must receive this book into ourselves. We must eat it. We must read it. But we also must do what it says. That's how we combat the schemes of the devil, and that's how we do not fall into his snare. If we are not wise and fear God and ingest this book, and then we stay ignorant. And what does the Bible say? My people fall away for lack of knowledge, right? For lack of understanding. We are the church. Remember the light, the lampstand? We're the lampstand that illuminates Christ to the world. They won't see him unless we show him. And so living in the light of eternity here is do not fall into the snare of the devil. Eat this book, but also do it and walk out and proclaim Jesus. Be the light of the world. Because the devil is scheming. He's ardently, masterfully, strategically doing this. Okay? So all the evil you see around there is building towards something. Don't get caught in it, but fight it. All right? I usually try to ask questions, but we have to get going. Any questions real quick? Any thoughts or questions? Anything? That's all right. Mm-hmm. Daniel will tell you which animal, like, it describes that it has yeah. Daniel actually tells you, like the leopard is Greece, the bear is Persia, and the lion is Babylon. But yeah, like I said, anytime there's a beast, go to Daniel. Anytime there's something weird in Revelation you can't understand, go to Zachariah. And like I said, Jeremiah 51 is like so crucial to this passage. But yeah, let me close in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we just ask that you would take everything given today and bring us the spirit of revelation and understanding, that we may know what the schemes of the enemy are, that we may understand it. Give us the power to walk in your word, Lord, and to live it out in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so next week, chapter 18 and the beginning of chapter 19. So the first 11 verses of 19. All right, thank you.